Is there a right way to show your young child how to sit politely at the table? How do you know when your child is ready to sit at the family table? And should all families do everything they can to eat together at the end of the day? Is that better than eating at separate times? So the big question is this: how do we navigate through the mountain of overwhelming, often contradictory, and sometimes false parenting information we find online? What parenting information should you believe and apply, and what should you reject? That is the big question, and in this podcast, we will help you understand what underlies your child's behavior and explain how to react in a way that favors your child's optimal development. I'm Alexandra Scherzer, and welcome to the Wise Parenting Podcast. If you're listening in today, chances are you're like me and like most parents I know. You want your young child to grow up to sit properly, behave well, and generally be pleasant at the family table. But if you look around, you will see parents trying to reach this goal with all kinds of different strategies and tactics. And if you get online and start reading tips at how to reach this goal, you will find even more information, some of which is contradictory, and you may not end up feeling any clearer after this short bout of research about the topic. So today we take you behind the scenes again, for you to listen in on a conversation I had with my mom, Dr. Solomon, about young children eating at the table. I ask her questions that I think many parents are thinking about, and by the end of our conversation, we get to the bottom of what underlies your young child learning what you want her to learn so that she does grow up to be pleasant to sit with at the family meal and eat with, either at home or out. So if you would like your young child to grow up to eat politely at the table, develop the social skills to engage in conversation with whomever is around the table, and behave appropriately whether eating at home, at a friend's house, or out at a restaurant, then listen in. Today's episode will give you some quick takeaways on the topic. And listen back to episode 15, where we took a deeper dive into understanding how young children learn proper behavior and manners at the table. So here it is, a conversation I had with my mom, Dr. Solomon, all about young children eating at the table.
The internet gives you a lot of information about how to get your toddler or young child to eat at the table, and they tell you what to put on the plate and how much to put on the plate and how to persuade the child to eat and how to bribe and what not to bribe and how long to expect the child to sit, what toys to provide, what toys not to provide, whether you should permit leaving the table or not permit leaving the table, what to expect and therefore stay calm, etc. Woo. Why are you putting yourself through that? They should not be at the table. Okay. Being at the table should be a privilege that comes with a child who can sit comfortably on a kitchen chair or on the dining room table for 15 or 20 minutes, has passed the stage of seeing what happens to food and objects when they roll off the plate or fall on the floor, has passed the stage of saying no in order to develop a sense of autonomy, is cognitively advanced enough to be interested in and partake in the family conversation, feels rewarded to be allowed at the table, not forced to be there. In many cases, this comes around the age of 5.
So where should they be before then?
They should be fed before supper. There are articles, I took a couple out, saying, in order for your child to sit at the table, this is what you have to do.
But and
they give long lists of this.
But they're saying sitting at the table with the family?
With the family. Where's the family? Well, that's the whole point. Be with the family. And they're too young to be with the family. They're not interested. They don't have the cognitive ability to be interested in what father did at work today. A lot of them are still, they say no, not because they mean no, but because they have to develop their autonomy. So the first answer is no. You know all about that.
Yeah.
So what are they doing at the table? Why are the parents putting themselves through such stress? For what? And it screws up the marital relationship. Not in every case, but in many, the couple gets into a fight. Leave him alone, don't leave him alone, don't force him to eat, make him eat, he should eat vegetables, don't give him dessert. Ugh. Until they feel that they want to be there and that they can be there, that they have all the developmental stages are passed.
So what do you say about what we've done, where when we're sitting, we really feed him before.
Mm-hmm.
We don't all eat together at supper. We eat together at breakfast. But it's much shorter and faster.
Yeah, exactly.
But for supper, like if we're all sitting as a family for supper, then he's invited to come, but he doesn't have to come. And he can play around if he doesn't want to come. So what about that?
Yeah, provided you don't get into a thing about his coming or not coming. It's a privilege to sit at the table with your parents and be an adult.
So eventually, in the child's brain, it switches, and provided that it's set up like this in the house, and they will want to sit at the table.
Yes, they will want to sit at the table or want to be with everybody. And this, I didn't talk about older and younger children, but especially with younger children, if the older children's already at the table, it's a big draw to sit at the table. But you can only sit at the table when you reach a certain stage. Otherwise, sweetheart, wait, you'll sit at the table next year. No, I want to sit at the table. That's great.
Okay. So really, feed them before separately?
Absolutely. Feed them before separately. And I suppose, if everybody's in a good mood and everybody's happy, you can invite the child to join you for dessert, which makes eating at the table even a bigger draw.
Well, that's if they're awake. By the time we eat, he's sleeping.
Well, all the more reason for him not to be at the table.
And so then how do you extrapolate that to going out to eat? So if you never eat together as a family at home, but you'd like to go out to dinner, an early dinner with your children or child, but they never sit with you at the table, how does that work?
I would have to give that some thought. I don't want to answer off the top of my head. The first answer off the top of my head is that there are many, many children that you cannot take out to a restaurant to dinner. Does this mean you can't take your child out to dinner? That's a very good question. There are some children you can take out to dinner and some children that you can't. That's a fact of your life.
So it's knowing which type of child you have. I imagine some people will hear what you just said and say, well, how will they learn to be at the table if
we
if we don't sit together and they won't one day say, oh, I want to be at the table and be perfectly mannered at the table.
Well, they observe. They are watching you eat at the table. The fact that they're not sitting in the chair has nothing to do with it. They're observing that as they observe everything else that you do. And if they have the cognitive ability and it's pleasing for them, they will imitate. Because they choose what to imitate. They're little monkeys. They imitate everything that they want to. But to imitate, you have to understand what you're watching, where they sometimes get into trouble, incidentally. And B, you have to be able to do it. And C, it has to give you pleasure to do it. So a child who has observed his parents sitting and eating at the table and being happy at the table is a nice, friendly place, will want to eat at the table.
So does that mean like when they're babies and they're in the high chair?
You can pull the high chair up to the table. It's entirely different. When they're still in the high chair, they're much younger. Their interest is, in being close to you always, and in eating. And it's not the same as sitting at the dining room table and doing all kinds of things that upset your parents, like throwing the food on the floor, like slamming the food back on the plate, like slamming the plate, like tossing the fork across the table. They don't do all this when they're sitting in a high chair.
Right.
They're much younger at different stages.
So to be clear, the high chair's
you can pull the high chair
separate.
over to the table. It's separate food. It's separate everything. It's a separate little world beside the family table.
Mm-hmm.
It's not at the family table.
Okay, so that's important.
Yes, it is important.
Distinction.
Yeah.
So then they come out of the high chair,
Mm-hmm.
and then
they are fed before dinner or lunch or whatever it is.
okay. So
I can see a situation where there would be a chair, and a child, if he decides to come and climb up or get help to get on the chair and sit with you, that he would be welcome. But he's not expected to sit and eat at the table. That's what the big distinction is.
okay, it's what the child's allowed to do versus what's expected
Yes.
of him
Mm-hmm.
or her.
Mm-hmm.
So what about, let's talk about details about some of the things that you read. So what about when, in order to get your child to stay at the table, you read book after book, you play with the toys.
Yeah, this is one not at the family table.
No.
He's eating before dinner.
Right.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if that were, I'm saying if that were at the family dinner, so a family table. So everyone's sitting at the family table.
Yeah.
But then an adult has to constantly be entertaining the child.
Right. Another reason why he shouldn't be there. That adult should be interacting with the other adults or older children and relaxing.
So, well, that's one of the reasons that drove us to feed him before and put him to bed, is because we can't relax if he's eating with us.
Of course you can't. They have no business at the table.
So, better to change a schedule,
Mm-hmm.
the family schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and feed younger children who aren't ready to sit properly at the table, feed them before,
Absolutely.
and then older children or just adults eat a relaxed dinner together.
Absolutely.
So I would imagine some people would say, well, that's a lot more work.
Well, I think I would suggest they try it. They'll discover that yes, it may be a little more work to prepare dinner or part of the dinner beforehand in order to feed your child, but it's more than compensated for by being able to sit down and relax and enjoy your dinner, and again, keep in positive contact and pleasant interaction with the other adults in the house.
Right.
That's a biggie.
That's a big one. Okay, so how would you know if your child's ready? If a child wants to, but then still behaves in such a way that shows that they're not ready.
Well, you can tell by the way they handle the food at the table, by how often they get up and down from the table, how often they start entertaining themselves, as I said, by throwing things on the floor. Because when they're young, even though they're past the early stages of throwing things on the floor to see if they bounce or they roll or they splatter or they make things wet or what have you, which is all very interesting for your child who's basically a scientist and is trying to see how things work. Even when he's past that stage, if he's not interested in the conversation, he's getting a little tired of sitting there, he's a little bit bored, well, he may toss things on the floor to see what happens if the potatoes crack open or they roll or I don't know. I have to think of a few interesting things that potatoes can do when they hit the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they look mashed or they look cut. Because they're learning. As a matter of fact, some of this is part of learning. But you don't want them to be doing that kind of learning when you should be sitting and relaxing with your significant others.
Right. Okay. So let's say the child expresses that they want to come to the table,
Mm-hmm.
and there may be something like 4, but then it's not working out.
Mm-hmm. Then you say something like, when you're a big boy, you'll be able to sit and have dinner with us. Now you can play with your toys, you can come sit near us, but right now we're going to have dinner, and you've had your dinner. But people go through this whole thing of forcing to sit at the table, and everybody gets all stressed.
Right, and then it's not pleasant.
It's not pleasant, it's pointless.
Mm-hmm.
and I could go on. Then the child starts associating sitting at the table with unpleasantness. And when he's 14, he won't sit with you.
Right. Well, maybe elaborate a bit on that.
Well, you are indeed setting up habits and interests and attitudes and all kinds of things with your preschooler and your toddler that are going to emerge full blown at adolescence. And if the family table has not been a pleasant place in childhood, wow, are they ever going to avoid it when they are adolescents, and they can do that.
Okay. Very good. Well, it's always the long road.
Always. In the wise parenting definition, one of the things we say is to know the consequences of your own actions. Mm-hmm. Well, parenting, we just get pregnant, boom. Evolution has set it up so we get pregnant, we have babies, and there they are, and we have to raise them. But if you want to be a wise parent and you want to stop and think, then you have to stop and think ahead, and you have to think that what you do has consequences in the long term and the very long term.
Right.
By that I mean even when they're adults. Are they going to be your friends? Are they going to come once a year at Christmas? Are they going to move across the continent in order to avoid you?
Right.
Take-home message for children
and eating at the table.
Eating is that if it's stressful for you and your partner or anybody at the table to have a child who is not ready to eat at the table, the child should not be there. On the other hand...
And you should feed them before.
You should feed them before. They shouldn't be waiting and hungry.
So that later you can eat at the adult table.
Exactly.
In peace and quiet and relax. Because mealtime should be...
Peace and quiet and relaxed.
And enjoyable.
And pleasant and enjoyable. So you shouldn't be doing anything that you don't have to take away from the meal being enjoyable. On the other hand, if it doesn't bother you to have a child at the table that you have to distract, who is pushing his food around his plate, who's getting food all over the table, who's dropping food on the floor, or whatever, if this doesn't bother you, well, by all means, have the child at the table. The important thing is that you should be comfortable and that everybody at the table should be enjoying being at the table together. That's what's important.
So that was the conversation I had with my mom, where I started to put together all the factors that lead to a young child growing up to be pleasant to sit with and eat with at the family table. The main takeaway from this conversation is that if your young child's behavior at the table frustrates you, gets between you and your significant other, prevents you from enjoying your meal at the end of the day, then the best option is to feed your young child earlier and to relax and enjoy a meal with your significant other later on. If everyone enjoys their time as a family eating together at the end of the day, and it doesn't cause tension between the adults, and your interaction with your young child remains pleasant and positive, then by all means, eat together. The issue is really that many families have difficulty enjoying their time when everyone eats together and mealtime turns into a training ground. Training ground is work, and it isn't pleasant. We're here to tell you that it's normal that your young child simply does not have the cognitive abilities to behave in the way that you would like yet. But if you model pleasant interactions with older children and with other adults at the table, and you set your expectations for your young child with her developmental stage and her current abilities in mind, then you will be on the right road to raising a young child who not only behaves well at the table, but enjoys and wants to sit with the family, engage, and behave properly. On a final note, keep in mind that for young children, eating at the table with adults should be viewed as a privilege, not an obligation. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, for a more in-depth explanation of how best to teach your child good table manners, tune in to episode 15. Also, we briefly discussed how important it is to keep on good terms with your significant other. And for more information on how your relationship influences your child's development, be sure to check out episode 9. We hope that you found today's podcast helpful. Come say hi on social. Our Facebook and Instagram accounts are at Dr. Solomon's Wisdom, all one word. You can subscribe to the Wise Parenting Podcast on any podcast app, including Spotify, the Apple and Google podcast apps, or wherever you listen. Parenting advice keeps changing on us, depending on what you read and who you listen to. This is making parents feel like they're doing a bad job. And worst of all, many parents today don't know who to trust for what is probably the most important job they'll ever have. So if you're the parent of a young child and you would like to feel clearer, more confident, and more at ease about your parenting decisions, then the Wise Parenting Academy can help you get there. With on-demand access to foundation lectures and seminars in digital, print, and audio, as well as exclusive one-on-one guidance from Dr. Solomon, the Wise Parenting Academy is the perfect next step to building the best long-term outcomes for your child. Come check us out at thewiseparentingacademy.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you will join us again.